Beginning of The Dark Knight Rises. Bruce has fallen into a depression. He's depressed. He's upset. He quit being Batman because he's so distraught over the death of Rachel Dawes and Harvey Dent and his inability to somehow save Harvey from the consequences of his own actions that he took on his own, which makes sense because that's totally how Batman thinks. But I mean, he falls into this deep depression. He never comes out of his mansion. He's just sulking around. He's injured. He's got he's got the cane and everything. Not even 40 years old yet, and he's only had 1 year of experience as Batman. Keep this in mind. Meanwhile, I mean, Batman became Batman when he was 20, like around 25 in the comics. So you got Bruce as Batman in The Dark Knight Returns. Now, this verse, something similar did happen. Jason Todd died, and in this alternate universe here, that caused Batman to quit. He was so distraught over it. He felt that, and it wasn't him though. That's just it. See, Bruce separated from himself the entity of Batman, the Bat, what he considered his own personal demon that he had crafted into a persona that he wore. All throughout the entire story, it's a philosophical take on how the media can shape how we view things, whether or not Batman is in essence, technically, when you get right down to it, a criminal himself. He breaks the law. He breaks the law in order to enforce the law and distribute justice. There are times Batman literally has to break a lesser law in order to enforce a greater law or the greater good. So, there's dealing with that. There's it's also a piece on how the media can easily shape your perception of a person. There's the whole concept of wrestling with an inner demon and whether or not it's actually a curse or not. Whether this was some sort of destiny thing, why that bat chose him, he felt. But he separated it into a separate persona in the comic. And he blamed it for everything that happened. Not himself. Not Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne blamed the Batman, for what it happened. Thought it brought nothing but pain to the people he loved, felt it was responsible for the death of Jason, for what happened to Harvey in the first place. For all this, he blamed the Bat, the persona of the Batman. And he threw it off, promised never again, went about his life. Now see, this is something that actually happens in Batman Begins too, is when you see Bruce and how he deals with loss like this. Bruce Wayne hasn't really acted like this, fallen into a depression like this since he was a child, and even then, he climbed out of it as he grew. Okay? And he was always more a person who, when there was something he was angry about, confused about, he just couldn't wrap his head around it. He'd go out and do stuff, try to block it out of his mind, block the pain out, block the whatever out, and also at the same time analyze this and try to understand it and try to understand what drove him to do that. But Bruce is doing that in The Dark Knight Returns too. He's kind of exploring why he felt he needed to be Batman in the first place. He's trying to fill the void. He's the Playboy act no longer became an act. He started actually engaging in that kind of lifestyle. He's entering drag races, thinking that maybe if he, keeps his adrenaline addiction fueled, that and he is frankly borderline suicidal. He is, but it's just expressed in such a different way. It manifests so differently. Even within the movie universe itself, Bruce's attitude, like way back when, is so different than what you see here. It's almost like a completely different person. I'm not even kidding. And then we get into the villains. Now, like I said, they killed Harvey. The Joker's not coming. There's problems with that. I mean, Harvey, part of Harvey's role in the tale is that he's supposed to be a character piece, so to speak. It's why, can someone really change? Would fixing his face and just fixing the way the world perceives him fix the way he perceives himself? And in fact, it doesn't. In fact, he perceived himself as so twisted that when they fixed his face, Instead of seeing two halves of a fully human face, they both looked deformed to him. That was how far gone Harvey Dent was. That was something that Batman had to deal with. That was something that made him sort of realize that you can't run from who you really are. And he is the Batman. It's part of who he is. The Joker, part of the Joker's thing is he does see how the media's perception is, people's perceptions being shaped by the media. He is seeing how people in the media are just so willing to so blatantly throw Batman under the bus for for oh my god, they're literally blaming him for the crimes of these criminals, calling them narcissistic proxies. Basically, he somehow pushes them into these crimes, and in doing so, he's actually the criminal, and they're his victims. It got ridiculous, but he saw that, and when you see him watching that, and when you see him being mentioned again, and when Joker sees that he's back, and he sees how this is, working, he gets that grin on his face again, works out a plan. He's going to go for one last run. He's got something to prove. And that, in and of itself, is whether or not he can finally push him over the edge. He can see that the man is back. He's older now. He's certainly getting more forceful than he used to be. And he wants to see if he can give him one last push. Now, going beyond that, yeah, there are some things that are definitely going to have to change if we're going to adapt Dark Knight Returns outside of the 1980s. I mean, the Cold War, over, Superman, yeah, they're not going to be able to get Superman probably. Especially since the last Superman that they had established was gone. There wasn't a Superman movie due out until after this one, so the odds of him actually squaring off with Superman in this alternate future were slim. That part of the story you can adjust to a certain degree, sure. The problem then, though, is that honestly, I would have loved to see them, keep the mutants in there, but that's another problem. See, in The Dark Knight Returns, Gotham has just, since Batman's been gone, devolved into a cesspool. It's another reason that Bruce couldn't escape the fact that the Bat was needed, that he was needed, that it actually was not causing more pain, it was what was preventing it. And he had been running from that, so convinced in his own reality, so convinced that that was the case, so convinced that that thing was the reason for every bad thing that had happened to him. But it wasn't. It's actually what helped him prevent all that from happening to others. And it's something that this movie just completely throws away the moment they wrote about the Dent Act. Because now Gotham's just so squeaky clean, Batman was never needed, there was no reason for him to come back, and in order for him to even get back in the Batcave and fire up the computers again, Selina Kyle has to steal his mother's necklace. And then, shock and awe, they happen to find out about Bane while they're doing some research. I mean, in this, the sheer contrast between these two tales. I mean, you can't even say, oh, it's an adaptation, they're going to change this stuff. They're changing the very core of this tale. Now, granted, like I said, you're going to have to change some stuff just because of that, and because they're trying to mix in No Man's Land and Nightfall. There we have a problem, though. They don't mesh. They just don't. And Bane was quite literally the biggest disservice you could have done to a character, to a fan base, to everything. Look, the reason that Bane, even though he was a relatively new villain, made such a freaking big impression right out of the gate was because of Nightfall. It was because Batman in his prime, okay? Batman in his prime faced off against him, and he still managed to outmaneuver him, outwit him, beat him down, and snap his goddamn back. Okay, which in order to recover from, he had to go back into training for a while because muscle memory was shot. Okay, he had to reteach himself. I mean, that is why Bane left such a huge impression. It's similar to what's another one? Venom and Spider-Man. He was a relatively new villain too, but he cemented himself very quickly as being a major player because, I mean, he had, Spider-Man in his prime uh, winds up facing off against this thing and it dang near killed him. Uh, you, uh, it's because of that shock factor, the intimidation factor. Here you got Bane showing up, and Bane, oh my god, Bane faces a broken down Batman who's rusty, has had, has had almost no experience since he quit. This is who Bane is fighting. And I know people try to say, oh, it's still impressive because he's the Batman. No. No, 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 no. No, see, he is an old, rusty fossil at this point. Even in The Dark Knight Returns, Bruce had kept in shape, but he was getting old. See, that was the thing. Bruce was a 55-year-old man. 45 when he had quit. 25 when he had started being Batman in the comics. So he had like 20 years of experience of being Batman before he quit. Okay? Then 10 years of being on, and then he tried to get back into it. Now, he had kept himself in shape at least. That's for sure. But he was older. He was slower. Doing the things that he used to do put more of a strain on his body. Now, yes, Batman's injured here and on ridiculous levels, but that's the problem. See, you're introducing a character like Bane to a shell of Batman. When you break a shell of a character, when you break a character who is already half broken down, it's just not as impressive. Like in the comics, okay, of no, heck, what was it? Let's see. Well, yeah, in the comics, if this Batman that Bane had broken was an old Batman who could only move at about half his old speed, who was you know, complaining about back pain the entire time before he met him, who was, you know, all this, that wouldn't have been near as impressive. It wouldn't have left near the mark. If, oh god, what's another good example? Okay, the whole, alright, god, I hate going back to this show, but it's a good example. Okay, Dragon Ball Z, when Trunks shows up, you really get an idea for how strong the kid is because he kills Frieza. Not only is it Frieza, but it's actually a stronger Frieza than the one that they had faced before. And yet he kills him easily. Now, if that Frieza hadn't been a stronger Frieza, or even the same Frieza, but that broken down, weakened, half of his body missing Frieza that was there on Namek, and Trunks had killed him, well, that would have left near the impression, no, because at that point you'd have thought, geez, look at him, probably anybody could have killed him. Not necessarily the case, mind you, technically speaking, but you get the point. You get my point. It was literally the worst idea to make it Bane. It just was. And then what they do to him, all this stuff that's supposedly his backstory actually turns out to be the backstory of Talia al Ghul. Bane's entire backstory, oh, I'm in love with her and I was kicked out of the League of Shadows for loving her. It was my only crime and they deemed me a monster. Now, I'm not going to say anything outright, but think about that. Why would you be labeled a monster for loving a girl? Well, when you think about it, she was actually a young girl at the time he was in my new League of Shadows. So, to a degree, they're kind of implying Bane may have been a pedophile. Yay. Now, and this is another problem too. See, Bane and Batman. Oh my God, the fight in the movie is just so badly choreographed and so badly done, and so I mean, Batman, when he first tries to fight the leader of the mutants, okay, in The Dark Knight Returns, he sort of puts up a good fight, but he still gets his ass handed to him, okay? He gets the snot beat out of him. He gets almost beaten to death. And he has to take time, he has to recuperate, and what's he do? He comes up with a strategy. He knows this guy, he can't match the guy's savagery, and the kid is faster than him, he's in his prime. So what's he do? Tricks him into a mud pit. Why? Because it will slow him down too, and then it becomes a matter of timing and precision, which is where Batman still excels. And by the end of that fight, he's got both his legs and his arms broken. Okay, why couldn't they have done that there? I mean, they're adapting the Dark Knight Returns anyways. It's a perfect example of how Batman's tactical mind would come into play, but they don't do it. He just goes straight up to him again and straight up fist brawls. I mean, what?